it's me again, and we're jumping back into Roger Williams' adventure. I know the music's cool and everything, but we could really do without that right now. It's kind of distracting. So yeah, Roger is on a quest for a charter for Providence Plantations, and he's heading to England. Nowadays, crossing the Atlantic Ocean can be accomplished in a mere 6 hours by plane, or a little more than 2 weeks if you prefer to travel by boat. But back in Roger's time, a typical voyage from America to England took about 2 months. When the weather was fair, there was lots of time to gaze over the decks at the vast expanse of rolling waves, and the circling gulls that battled over the leavings from the fish the sailors cleaned. You could perhaps talk to the other passengers, if they were friendly. But otherwise, there wasn't much else to do, unless you were a sailor and helped with the work of the ship. There was much time for thinking, and Roger was doing just that. And thinking soon led to writing. For a while, he had been wishing to record all the things that he had learned about the Indian tribes and their language, but had never really had time. Now he had plenty. He scribbled down as much as he could remember, and by the time he made it to England, he had enough papers to make a little book. He tucked them away into his coat pocket and forgot about them for now. He needed to focus on his quest. The London Roger arrived in was quite different from the one he had known as a child. There was no king there any longer. Parliament made the rules for the nation now. The king, Charles I, was still alive, but less than half the country would listen to him. England was in grave trouble. For a year now there had been war between those who obeyed the king and those who wished Parliament to rule. It was a difficult time to be asking special favors from the government. But Roger was undaunted by the challenge. He went straight ahead and petitioned Parliament for his charter. It took a little more than a year, but eventually, after much patience, he got what he wanted. His success was at least partially due to the help of some powerful friends within Parliament. The young Sir Henry Vane was there, that ex-governor of Massachusetts dude that was a friend of Anne Hutchinson's. He was actually part of a group specially selected to watch over the American colonies. It was called the Commission for the Government of the Colonies. I know, sounds very prestigious. Oliver Cromwell was another friend who was present. He was a man of increasing power within Parliament. We don't know for sure, but it's often said that Roger first met Cromwell while he was working as a chaplain for Sir Masham. And interestingly, I was doing a bit of research to try to find evidence for this, and I stumbled across something else that was utterly mind-blowing. It seems like their relationship went a bit deeper than friendship, let's just say. So, check this out, guys. If we go back in Oliver Cromwell's paternal genealogy 100 years, to the mid-1500s, we get this couple, okay? Morgan Williams and Catherine Cromwell. So, you're probably wondering, how did Oliver end up with a maternal surname? Well, it happens that this Catherine Cromwell was a sister of Thomas Cromwell, the Lord Great Chamberlain to King Henry VIII of England. Pretty important guy. I mean, Lord's a big enough title. If you've got Lord Great Chamberlain in front of your name, you've got to be something special. Well, since this Morgan guy married the sister of Tommy here, he began to use the last name Cromwell in official documents because of the new prestigious, powerful associations with the last name. Well, Tommy here got on Henry's bad side eventually, and as most people who got on his bad side ended up losing his head, but regardless, the new last name still stuck in the Williams family. At least through the eldest son it did. But check this out. If we go down a couple generations, we find out that Roger Williams and Oliver Cromwell were actually cousins. Is that like insane, guys, or what? Now, they're distant cousins, granted. Oliver is like the third cousin of Roger, and Roger is his fourth cousin. But still, I think it's possible they could have known. I kind of think it probably had something to do with Roger's success in getting the charter, but that could just be me. I mean, stuff like that never happens today. Heh, heh. So, yeah, Henry Vane and Cromwell helped Roger out, but it was Robert Rich, the Earl of Warwick in particular, who really made the charter possible. He was the leader of that commission for the government of the colonies, and while he may not have really known Roger personally, he was on good terms with Cromwell. The Earl's grandson would actually go on to marry Cromwell's daughter, Frances. So it's very possible that Cromwell had a strong hand in persuading the Earl to pass the charter. You may imagine, with almost a year of waiting in London, that Roger must have found something to do with himself rather than wander aimlessly around the streets. He spent some of the time talking to many of his old friends, and he showed them the papers he had written about the Indians. His friends were fascinated. "You should make them into a book," they told him. "People here in England would love to hear about these exotic people." John Milton, a famous poet, was one of these excited friends. He and Roger had met at Cambridge while they were in college. "I know a good printer who has published many of my poems," he told Roger. "You must come and meet him." He took him to Gregory Dexter's printing shop, and in just a few months, the little book was in print. It was called A Key into the Language of America. Just as Milton and the others had predicted, the book soon became quite popular, for the English were curious about the strange native peoples across the ocean. But this was not the only work Roger had published. He also wrote another book during the long months of waiting, this one on a different topic. The Bloody Tenet of Persecution was a book speaking against the cruelties of religious persecution and explaining the importance of separation of church and state. It really began as a letter in reply to John Cotton. Cotton had written a few times before to Roger, and he believed that it was right for Massachusetts Bay Colony to make everyone who lived there believe the same things. Of course, Roger very much disagreed with this, but he had decided to make his reply public, so that all the world could hear the message of soul liberty. This book was not quite as popular as his first, however. Several powerful men in Parliament were quite angry when they read it. They didn't agree with Roger's ideas at all. They thought that Catholics and other people they disagreed with must be punished and excluded. They were so angry, in fact, that they ordered the Bloody Tenet of Persecution be burned. But by this time, Roger had already received his charter. Snatching up a few copies of his hated book, he smuggled them away with him back to Providence. And oh, how glad he must have been to at last meet his little second son. How glad his family must have been to see him again after so long. Massachusetts and Connecticut could no longer try to encroach on their borders, and the settlements of Providence, Portsmouth, Newport, and Warwick, another new little town in the area, were united. The colony was saved. Roger set busily about putting Rhode Island and Providence plantations, for this was the full name of his newly chartered colony, into order. More land was meted out to newcomers. Disputes were settled, and then there was the problem of wolves to be dealt with. New England was practically teeming with wolves back in those days, and they were a constant threat to livestock and sometimes to humans as well. Roger encouraged hunters to wage a full-scale war against the silver-coated beasts, offering rewards for each head that was brought into him. But not everyone was glad of Roger's return. You may recall that I had told you when he first set out that he had not asked the permission of the island towns of Portsmouth and Newport to unite them with Providence. Well, now, when the islanders found out what he had done, many of them were very displeased. William Coddington, the friend of Anne Hutchinson, and the judge of the two towns, was particularly upset. He felt that Roger was infringing on their independence, which indeed he was, and that something must be done about it. "I would rather unite with Massachusetts than him," he cried. Several others joined Coddington in protesting the Union, and they refused to acknowledge that they were part of it. The argument went on for quite some time. It wasn't settled until 1647, nearly 4 years after the charter had been granted. A few selected men from each of the 4 towns got together and finally agreed to sign the charter. But Coddington was still angry. When he was elected governor of Rhode Island in 1648, he wouldn't even show up to take the office. Another man had to be chosen in his place. Coddington sent a letter to Plymouth, asking if they would make an alliance with Portsmouth and Newport. He quickly changed his mind, however, when he received back a very long list of things that Plymouth wished to control. Plymouth didn't really want an alliance. They wanted to govern the island towns as subjects. Something else must be done. Finally, he decided, well, why not take a trip to England himself? He returned in 1651 with his own special paper. Yep, Coddington had got another charter. This one made Portsmouth and Newport separate from Providence and Warwick. And it made him the lifelong governor of not only Auchinleck, but also of the adjoining island of Connecticut. How did Roger Williams feel about this? Well, we'll have to find out in the next episode.